3 days after I buried my husband, the landlord of the house Marcus had been renting called me with words that turned my blood cold. His voice was nervous, almost afraid, like a man who had seen something he wished he could unsee. He said his name was Edward Collins, and that he had found something I needed to see, something urgent, something that could not wait. Then came the sentence that made my heart stop beating for a full 3 seconds. "Do not tell your sister," he said. "Do not tell her fiancé. You have to see this alone." I did not ask why. Something in his tone told me this was not a request. I grabbed my car keys with trembling hands and drove toward downtown Ashford, Connecticut, my pulse pounding the entire way. When I opened that office door 20 minutes later, what I saw made me grab the door frame to keep from collapsing. But before I tell you what was behind that door, I need to take you back to the funeral because that is where this nightmare truly began. I am truly grateful you are still here with me. Before we continue, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. It means more than you know, and I read every single one. Also, please note the story includes some fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is meaningful and worth hearing. 20 minutes later, I pushed open the door to that downtown Ashford office and stared at a ghost. The man I had just buried was standing right in front of me, perfectly alive. His name was not Marcus. My name is not Aaron. And Edward Collins was not a landlord. Edward was an agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My real name is Nora, and the man standing in front of me was my husband, Julian. Julian had not died in a tragic car crash. He had survived a meticulously planned assassination attempt involving severed brake lines. The Bureau placed him in protective custody and initiated a death notification ruse to see who would make a move on our family estate in upstate New York. The target was an $8,500,000 inheritance, and the predators were already inside my home. My older sister, Clara, moved into my isolated house the day after the fake funeral. She brought her designer suitcases and a rehearsed mask of devastating grief, claiming she could not bear to let her baby sister mourn alone. Her entitlement surfaced before Julian's fake ashes were even cold. I walked into my kitchen on the third morning to find Clara sitting at my island. She wore Julian's favorite oversized gray wool sweater. She sipped chamomile tea from his personal mug. She sighed, tracing the rim of the cup, and called the sprawling estate too gloomy for a young widow. She suggested we sell it. She suggested I sign over the administrative rights to her fiancé, Derek, so I would not have to stress my fragile mind. My fingernails bit into my palms until the skin nearly broke, forcing a trembling, grateful smile onto my face. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and thanked her for her kindness. I had to play the broken, naive widow. I had to let the parasite fester in my home so the Bureau could build their case. 2 nights later, the emotional abuse escalated into a physical threat. Clara knocked softly on my bedroom door and brought me a cup of warm tea alongside a handful of small, pale pills. She called them grief sedatives. She smoothed my hair and told me I needed to sleep, that I was becoming a burden to my own health. She thought I was just a weeping housewife. She forgot I am a trauma nurse. One glance at the scoring and shape of those pale pills triggered alarms in my brain. I did not need a toxicology lab to identify them. It was a massive, lethal dose of pharmaceutical-grade insulin. A quiet, fatal killer that induces a hypoglycemic coma, mimicking a natural cardiac event. I recognized the faintly scratched-off label on the vial in her pocket. It was the highly concentrated compound our late grandfather used before he died. Clara had hoarded it for years, keeping it in her purse like a loaded gun. A memory flashed behind my eyes. Our grandmother Beatrice clutching her chest last November, collapsing onto the hardwood floor from sudden heart failure. Clara had cried the loudest at the funeral. She draped herself over the casket, wailing about the tragedy of natural causes. She poisoned our grandmother for her share of the wealth. Now, she was serving me the exact same untraceable cocktail. I took the pills from her palm. I thanked her, my voice weak and raspy. I brought the cup to my lips, pretended to swallow the capsules, and lay back on the pillows. Clara smiled, turned out the light, and shut the door. The second the latch clicked, I spat the dissolving pills into my hand. I dropped them into a small glass jar hidden in the back of my bathroom vanity. I did this every single night for a week. Friday morning, Clara and Derek drove me to a mahogany-lined conference room in downtown Albany. A private attorney slid a thick stack of papers across the polished table. It was an irrevocable living trust and a legally binding transfer of $8,500,000 into an account Clara completely controlled. Clara pushed a heavy silver pen toward my hand. I did not pick up the pen. I reached into my purse, pulled out the glass jar rattling with lethal insulin pills, and slammed it onto the mahogany table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. I leaned forward and verbally dissected her exact medical murder method, detailing the insulin concentration and the hypoglycemic reaction it would cause. The attorney scrambled backward. Clara's face went completely white. The heavy conference doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the room, shouting orders, badges flashing under the fluorescent lights. But Clara was a masterclass manipulator. She executed a terrifying pivot. She dropped to her knees, sobbing hysterically. She rolled up her silk sleeves to reveal deep purple bruises covering her forearms. She reached into her bag and handed the lead agent a burner phone and a copy of a temporary restraining order. She had filed that restraining order against Derek 3 months ago in secret. It was her insurance policy. She wept, claiming Derek had been beating her, controlling her, and forcing her to drug me. She claimed the burner phone belonged to him. Derek stood frozen, his jaw unhinged, completely blindsided by the woman he intended to marry. The legal headache was an absolute nightmare. Clara's premeditated, battered woman defense tied the hands of the district attorney. To avoid a catastrophic public relations disaster, a judge granted Clara bail for 48 hours, while forensic teams verified the burner phone's metadata. Derek was hauled off to a federal holding cell. Clara walked out the front doors of the courthouse, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I drove back to the estate alone. I knew the monster was still free. I knew she would not run. She was too arrogant, and the money was too close. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the estate plunged into absolute darkness. The power grid failed. Clara had planned her entry perfectly. She cut the exterior fiber optic cable to disable the wireless security cameras. She used a cloned alarm fob she had copied while living in my guest room. She thought she was a ghost slipping through the shadows. She did not know I had completely anticipated her ego. I swapped the locks on the patio doors that afternoon. I left the back entrance intentionally unlocked. A silent invitation, luring her directly into the master bedroom. Hidden on top of the armoire was a battery-powered, offline trail camera recording in crystal-clear definition. The floorboards groaned. Clara crept into the pitch-black bedroom. She stood over the heavy duvet on my bed, pulling a syringe of pure insulin from her coat pocket. She dropped the weeping victim act entirely. Her voice dripped with pure, venomous malice. She sneered at the blankets, whispering how easy it had been to fool the authorities. She gloated about watching our grandmother gasp for air on the living room floor. She hissed that she had hated me since we were children, hated that I was loved, hated that I existed. She raised the syringe, plunging it downward into the heavy blankets. The needle hit solid polyester stuffing. "Are you done?" My voice echoed from the darkness of the walk-in closet. Clara ripped the duvet back, staring at the decoy constructed of spare pillows. I stepped out of the closet, holding an illuminated tablet. The screen displayed a live transmission, beaming her entire monologue directly to a federal cloud server. The bedroom lights snapped on, blindingly bright. Julian stepped out of the ensuite bathroom, perfectly alive, his eyes burning with absolute disgust. 2 armed detectives stepped out right behind him, their weapons leveled at her chest. Clara's face shattered. The arrogant malice dissolved into trembling, wide-eyed horror. She dropped the syringe. It clattered against the hardwood floor. She tried to force tears into her eyes, tried to stammer out another lie, but the trap had permanently snapped shut. Her innocent facade was legally and permanently annihilated by her own narcissism. She screamed as the detectives wrenched her arms behind her back. The handcuffs ratcheted shut with a heavy, satisfying click. They dragged her down the hallway, her designer boots kicking wildly, her desperate shrieks echoing off the high ceilings until the front doors finally slammed shut. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Faced with a lifetime in federal prison, Derek completely flipped on her. He provided emails, bank statements, and digital receipts, proving Clara was the mastermind who purchased the burner phone herself. Warrants were immediately issued to exhume our grandmother Beatrice's body. The specific toxicology screen confirmed the lethal insulin overdose. Edward Collins met me in the snowy driveway the next morning. He collected the final signed affidavits, tipped his chin in a respectful nod, and said the Bureau would handle it from here. He got into his black sedan and drove out of my life, closing the file for good. I did not say a single word to Clara after her arrest. I walked straight into the guest bedroom she had occupied. I stripped the expensive sheets off the bed, I shoved her leftover designer clothes, her makeup, and her expensive shoes into a heavy black trash bag. I dragged it down the stairs, hauled it out the front door, and hurled it onto the frozen driveway for the garbage collectors. That night, lying beside Julian in our warm, secure home, the estate was perfectly silent. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No guilt, no fear. The poison was finally gone. Months later, I sat in a crowded courtroom and watched the judge drop the gavel. The sentencing was absolute. The judge sentenced Clara to life in state prison without the possibility of parole, citing the calculated, predatory nature of her crimes against her own blood. The court ordered complete restitution and permanently froze every asset attached to her name. Derek was sentenced to 20 years for conspiracy and fraud. The community reaction was total devastation. Clara's country club friends, her neighbors, the people she had manipulated for years, severed all ties. She lost her freedom, but more importantly to a narcissist, she lost her reputation. She became a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered about at dinner parties. 6 months into her sentence, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. It bore the stamp of the state correctional facility. Clara was trying to reach out. It was a thick letter, undoubtedly filled with guilt trips, hollow apologies, and desperate pleas reminding me that she was still my sister. I did not open it. I did not read a single word. I struck a match, held the corner of the envelope to the flame, and dropped it into the fireplace. I watched the paper curl and turn to ash. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the profound, quiet peace of total indifference. My life now is built on a foundation of reality, not biological obligation. Julian and I surrounded ourselves with a chosen family of true friends, colleagues, and neighbors who treat us with genuine respect. The chaos of my past has been replaced by a light, steady calm. We are taught from a very young age to forgive family at all costs. Society drills it into our heads that blood is thicker than water, that you must endure disrespect, toxicity, and even danger simply because you share a last name. But sitting here today, standing in the light of my own survival, I need to tell you the truth. Blood is nothing more than a biological fact. Loyalty is a behavioral choice. Just because someone shares your genetics does not mean they share your values. Toxic entitlement does not deserve a free pass just because the person holding the knife sits across from you at the Thanksgiving table. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you. You are allowed to protect your peace with absolute ferocity. Narcissists will always view your grief as an open door. When you are broken, when you are mourning, a predator does not see a wound that needs healing. They see an opportunity to exploit. They use your exhaustion against you. Never make permanent financial or legal decisions when you are in the depths of sorrow. Beware of the person rushing you to sign papers while you are busy wiping your tears. True power is quiet until it needs to be loud. Clara relied on loud performances. She relied on fake tears, dramatic accusations, and aggressive manipulation to control the narrative. She thought my silence was weakness, but reacting with explosive emotion only gives a villain ammunition. Reacting with cold, silent strategy gives you the victory. I collected the evidence, I set the trap, I let her ego dig her own grave. Have you ever had to close the door on someone who shared your blood to protect your own life? Have you ever had to look at a family member and realize they were the enemy? If you have survived a toxic family dynamic, if you have had to build a fortress to protect your own mind, share your story in the comments below. You are not alone, and your survival story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to find their own strength. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We are building a community of people who choose peace over toxic loyalty, who refuse to be manipulated, and who know that trust is earned, never owed. I am Nora, I survived the poison, and I am finally free.